What's going on, everybody? You are tuned in to the Hot List. I come to you on Monday through Friday at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. We hang out and we talk real estate topics. We do this by answering a question of the day that is some type of real estate topic, question, or maybe concern. If you want to submit a question of the day, or maybe you just have a general real estate question, you're not sure where to start, I would love to be the real estate resource that you reach out to start with. All you have to do is shoot me your question that you would like answered, whether it's through Facebook, YouTube, or on the podcast player of your choice that you're listening to this episode on. I will first answer that question for you. Then I will use that question for future episodes just like this one, because if you have that question, the chance that somebody else is going to have that same question or similar question is very high. And by doing these, I'm not only able to help you get your question answered, but I'm able to help more and more people by doing videos and podcasts just like this one. So the question of the day today: can I paint concrete floors? Now, of course, the simple answer is yes, but what it all is involved with it, how much goes into it? Is it just like painting a wall? I mean, there's a ton of questions that can lead into this, and most of us think when we picture flooring, we picture carpet, wood, or laminate flooring, maybe even tile. Very rarely do we picture concrete floors unless it's in some commercial setting. Well, now concrete floors are becoming more and more popular, and what used to be seen in just basements and garages is now becoming increasingly popular in main floor homes as well. And there's even some areas that have radiant a radiant heat system built into the concrete floor, in areas that have severe winter, so you can heat the whole house from literally the ground up. And it used to be that concrete flooring was just kind of limited to decorative options, like simple designs and stamping. Now, and then it kind of went to maybe you could do something with like a colored sealant or a stain and apply it to the floor. Now painting is becoming more and more popular, but like I said, you can't just slap a coat of paint on the concrete and call it good. So to answer the question, can I paint concrete floors? The answer is yes, and we're going to talk about three basics of painting concrete floors. Number one, prepping the surface. Just like when you paint your your walls, the outside of your home, maybe even the ceilings, there is going to be some prep work involved, and this is usually the biggest issue people run into. They try to paint, it doesn't matter if it's walls, exterior, floors, they try to paint without having prepped first. And especially with concrete, in order to in order for the paint to adhere to the concrete well and last, the surface needs to be rough enough for the paint to get a hold of and have something to really cling to. And then of course it needs to be clean and dry on top of that. There may be a little more prep work and prep time with concrete than walls in your house. Uh, Done right, the end results can be absolutely amazing. I've seen some just absolutely incredible floors that have been painted, not just garage floors with that standard epoxy, but actual either living room floors, basement floors that look just beautiful. So, along with some of the prep work, you want to seal any cracks with concrete filler. Make sure that you sweep the concrete to remove any dust or loose debris that is sitting on top of the concrete. If there's any old paint or other material, maybe there's some adhesive. If there used to be tile or carpet down, you want to scrape that off the best that you can. And if you can't get some of that off, next what you want to do is wet the floor down with just a regular sprayer, or if you have a mop around the house. Once that floor is wet, then you want to apply a concrete degreaser and scrub the floor. What I've found that works best, talking to people and doing some research, those push brooms with the real stiff bristles on them, you put that degreaser down, just run that push broom back and forth, just scrubbing and cleaning the best you can. Make sure that you rinse it well. And then, of course, you want to clean up any excess water with a wet dry vac, making sure that the entire surface is completely dry before you start to do any painting or priming. And that brings us to number 2 on the list, prime and paint. Just like anything else, it needs to be primed and then painted. The concrete floor is no different. So once the floor is dried, it is extremely important to apply at least 1, if not 2, coats of primer. Just like we've talked about over the last couple weeks, 1 coat can get it done. 2 coats of primer is typically going to be the sweet spot for most types of painting. And make sure that you use paint that is designed for concrete. You need to make sure that it is some type of concrete paint. I mean, the paint that you put on your walls inside, like in your bedroom, that's not going to work. You will absolutely regret this later if you choose the wrong paint, because all the prep work that we just talked about, you're going to get to do all over again simply because you chose the wrong paint. Also, I would recommend taping off all the baseboards. We didn't cover this in the prep area, but I would recommend taping off baseboards and any other areas that you need to protect. And when you start priming, start applying the primer at the edges and work your way into the center or work your way out the door. And that's going to make sure that you work outside in or the path that you can get out of the room, so you don't just paint yourself with nowhere to go. And when applying the primer, make sure you get each coat applied in a single session. So don't apply half of it and take a lunch break, dinner break, because what you don't want to happen is part of your primer or paint to dry, and then you start on the other part, because it's almost going to appear 2 different shades, or there's going to start to have patches appear that may show through the final paint that you're going to do. Ultimately, you want to let each coat dry for about 24 hours. That's what is recommended for most of primers, especially if you're doing something like a basement. They don't always have the same ventilation that your main floor does. So allowing up to 24 hours is going to be the best bet. And once your primer is applied, it's dried, it's time to start painting. You want to use a concrete friendly epoxy paint. This it will actually tell you on the paint can if it is concrete friendly, but you want to use some type of concrete friendly epoxy, follow the same application process that you use with the primer and ensure good coverage of the edges before moving towards the center or the exit. And just like the primer, may take up to a full 24 hours to dry. So now you've painted, or now you've primed, now you've painted, you know, you got the prep work done at the beginning. Step number 3, seal the deal. So once the paint is dried, it's time to apply a concrete sealer. I would recommend following the manufacturer's directions. That's mostly to ensure that it is applied and cures properly. Because when applying the epoxy and the sealer, just also make sure that you use proper ventilation and masking. Those are so important. I can't stress that enough, because a lot of those sealers especially will release fumes as soon as you open it up. You definitely don't want to be breathing those in, get lightheaded, get sick, maybe even worse. So just make sure that you have some type of ventilation and masking set up as well. And when you choose the sealant, choose a sealant for the application. So if you're sealing something inside, outside, make sure it says exterior or interior depending on the floor location. Also, just a quick note I want to throw in here as well. Make sure it's compatible with the epoxy style paint that you just applied. You want to make sure that it's going to be compatible, not eat through it. Maybe it won't stick to it. So make sure that it is compatible with that. And again, this is going to be no different than the primer application or the paint application that you just did. So you can go start at the edges, work your way in or out the exit wherever you have a clear path. And of course, after you get all that done, then it is time to clean up. Excuse me. Thankfully, most primers, sealants, and even the epoxy paint that you can buy today can typically be cleaned up with soap and water. If you keep a bucket handy, you can soak the paint brushes, maybe even the rollers. This prevents them from drying onto the rollers of the brushes and having to replace them every time. And hopefully you use those plastic paint tray liners that are just temporary. You can just toss those out. You don't need to save those. Those are generally cheap enough that you can, buy a 3-pack or a 5-pack for just a few dollars. And there's no point to hang on to those and have to clean or scrub those out. Now, once the sealant dries, and this may take a full 24 hours, if not longer, you want to, speaking from experience, you want to use a sharp utility knife and cut along the edge of the painter's tape, whether it's any area that you protected, the baseboard, whatever the case may be. Use a utility knife, take your time, go around those edges with that knife. This is going to make it so much easier to start when you start pulling that tape. It's going to make it easier to pull off. It's going to leave a nice, crisp, clean edge, look really professional, and really give you something to be proud of and show off to friends and family. So that's it. Those are the 3 basics of painting concrete. Again, number 1, prepping the surface just like you would do with any other paint. It needs to be clean. Have nothing on there. With the concrete, you're gonna have to remove any type of anything that was down there. If there was glue, adhesive, whatever was down there, you need to scrape that off. Then you want to get it wet, throw some concrete degreaser down, get one of those push broom style brooms that's got the real stiff bristles on it, so you can scrub get it as clean as possible, and then of course clean up any excess water. I would recommend a wet dry vac. It worked for me, um, as opposed to like paper towels or towels. Wet dry vac, a lot easier. Just saying. Number two was prime and paint. Once that floor is dry from all the prep work, now it's time to prime and paint. You absolutely, absolutely must put a primer down with concrete. Um, I mean, it's going to make it look better with one coat, if not two, make it standing tall, looking that much better. Again, you will regret this if you don't do it, or if you even choose the wrong paint. So don't forget that as well. Plus, tape off the edges and like the baseboard or anything else that you want to protect. When you start priming and then painting, do the edges first, work your way towards the center or towards a doorway. Doing this and doing it in one session is really going to be the key, so it looks nice and even. And finally, number three, you want to seal it. So once the paint's dried, you want to use an epoxy, maybe even a sealer. Make sure you have some type of proper ventilation, whether it's windows open, some fans on, as well as mask protection, because some of those sealers, you open those up, breathe that in, those fumes are going to give you a headache, maybe even make you sick. You don't want to breathe those in, and just take care of yourself and take care of your family. So that's it. Those are the three basics of painting concrete. Let me know in the comments and post some pictures as well. Have you painted concrete in, whether it's your basement, garage, maybe even the main floor of your house? Let me know in the comments and drop some pictures. I would love to see them, hear from you guys, and just kind of see your overall finished projects. I appreciate y'all so much for tuning in. I've also included a couple links in the description. If you want to catch up on previous episodes, you can catch up on those on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That way, as new episodes drop in, you get notified that those are there, and they're automatically downloaded to your podcast player of choice. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and hanging out with me. Again, I'm your host, Matt Johnson with Keller Williams Realty. I do this because your experience matters and should be trusted with a veteran. Y'all have a phenomenal day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.